What's a not safe for work detail about a historical figure that's normally left out of the history books? The first thing the father of microbiology, Anton van Leeuwenhoek, put under a microscope was semen. They understood that semen was integral to the creation of life, but didn't yet understand the concept of single-cell organisms. He fully expected to see tiny little humans in his jizz. So yeah, the first thing he did was whack off on a slide and look at it. As I recall, he didn't do the deed himself. Mrs. Van Leeuwenhoek is credited as lab assistant. Hoppy frick. This is now my top comment of ever. Weirdos. Not all heroes wear capes. To be honest, that's very on brand for human behavior. George Washington had severe hemorrhoids, to the extent that he couldn't even ride a horse into battle sometimes, and had to be pulled on a cart. Guess we now know why he was standing on the boat in that one painting. Washington. No, it's fine. You brave men deserve the seats. I'd rather stand anyway. Soldiers. What a thoughtful and stoic leader. Paul Revere would ride from Boston to Newport RI to cheat on his wife. No, babe. For real, the redcoats are actually coming. I swear. In school I was taught that Ben Franklin had a string of pearls that was several feet long. He would add a pearl to it each time he slept with a new woman. JC, what kind of school did you go to? The school of hard cocks. Abigail Adams apparently spent a lot of time worrying that her son John Quincy Adams would jerk off or bang holes when he left the house, and advised against doing both in several letters to him. You must only do that at home, son. Have a good day at school, son. Don't forget your lunch. And remember, if anyone offers you a whore, just say no. The great magician Houdini once escaped a prison cell while fully nude as to not hide anything to escape. However, what the guards failed to check was that he hid a skeleton key in his ass cheeks. I remember doing a school report on him. Another was being locked nude in a Russian horse-drawn trailer, which was all metal with tiny barred windows. He convinced them to let him have a last kiss goodbye, and was passed lockpicks into his mouth which he used to escape. He'd also taught himself to regurgitate lockpicks by lowering a small potato down his throat on a string and bring it back up. He was just too thick for them to notice the key. Finally, being dummy thick actually helps you evade the guards. He clenched, so his ass cheeks couldn't clap and alert the guard. Mary Shelley, the author of Frankenstein, who also popularized Gothic literature, used to meet up with her future husband, poet Percy Shelley, at the cemetery where her mother was buried. They would meet up and have angsty X on her mother's grave BC. She was goth as hell. Moreover, Frankenstein was inspired by her fascination with reanimation, the idea of bringing something dead back to life. When she learned about this idea, she was obsessed with the idea of bringing back her baby who died days later after being born, thus sparking the idea of the monster of Frankenstein. That wasn't that unusual. Cemeteries also served as public parks until the 1900s. Her father disapproved of the two's union, because Shelley was his apprentice, so they met in secret at the cemetery and had sex. Shelley was also married at the time and also had a child. His wife found out about the affair and committed suicide. Soon after, Percy Shelley and Mary Shelley eloped and had a baby, who died, and traveled Europe together. Percy Shelley proved to be a witty husband and wanted to have multiple sexual partners, including Mary's sister. When Frankenstein was first published, Percy Shelley initially took credit for the novel. I wish I had sources, but I learned all of this in an English literature class by a professor who wrote her thesis on Mary Shelley. Yeah, the two of them traipsed across Europe and their kids kept dying. Like seriously, multiple children of theirs died in various Euro locations. William the Bastard's family was torn apart when his two youngest sons dumped a chamber pot on the head of his firstborn, leading to rebellions, wars, and eventually his firstborn's lifelong imprisonment. Yeah, that's siblings for ye. Well, now my most upvoted comment is about how siblings can and will murder each other. Fun. Also, thanks kind stranger, I'll be sure to pass on a favor. Firstborn, rotting in prison. This is bullet. They started it. Simon Bolivar had ex in every country he went with different women, and it's explained with details in his biography. He was a really good dancer. I like how his dancing skills are in parentheses, as if that detail is what we needed to clarify him having ex in every country. I'm gonna take up dancing lessons. I read once that philosopher Jean-Jacques Rousseau would pull his pants down and chase after women running backwards in hopes they would spank him. It was his kink. He would lurk in alleyways with his pantaloons around his knees and jump out ass first at passing women in the hopes they'd be so frightened they'd lash out and spank him. He was a total donghead, but the mental image is hilarious. What a straight up freak. I did not learn this and I have a whole damn philosophy degree. They never teach you the important stuff. One of the members of the Lewis and Clark expedition was a slave named York. The tribes they came across were quite taken with him. He fathered many children during the trip. Ben Franklin slept around and mostly stayed in France for the prostitution. He also wrote at length the benefits of sleeping with older women, including their experience, lack of interest in anything exclusive, and inability to get pregnant. This man had it all figured out. To quote, he also thought all cats look the same in the dark. Mfa made his own money and was president of the OG anti-slave movement. Dude was ahead of his time. His old mistress's apologue is quite a read, covering all above with a basket, and regarding only what is below the girdle. It is impossible of two women to know an old from a young one. And as in the dark all cats are grey. Leonardo da Vinci kept poems and jokes about peanuts. Kept, like had a collection of, or did he write them? He wrote them, kept a few in his journals. So he's like Jonah Hill's character from Superbad, filling all his journals full of dongs. So this one day I was finishing up this big, veiny, triumphant bastard. When I was a little kid, I kinda had this problem, and it's not even that big of a deal. Something like 8% of kids do it. But whatever. For some reason, I don't know why, I would just kinda sit around all day and write poems about dongs. Gouverneur Morris wrote the language to much of the Constitution, including the preamble. He also had a wooden leg, because he broke it so bad it had to be amputated. The accepted story is that his leg was caught in the reins of his horse as they got spooked, but the rumor that went around was he broke his leg jumping from a window to escape the husband of a woman he was sleeping with. In revolutionary France, a crowd surrounded his carriage, because they thought he was a French aristocrat. He took his wooden leg off and pointed it at them, saying he lost his leg in the pursuit of liberty. He also died from complications after using a whalebone as a catheter. Did not see that ending coming, gotta say. Benjamin Franklin liked to take air baths, which meant sitting in the window of his London house with the windows open, totally nude. I have visited that very house, which is now a museum, and stood in that very window. They are big Georgian style windows, and I suspect that anyone in the house opposite, or possibly even glancing up from the street from the right angle direction, would have seen the full founding father. He was also a stoner, an occultist, a drunk, he fricked a lot, and was a scientist. So he was kind of America's founding badass uncle. Raphael, the Italian painter, not the Ninja Turtle, is believed to have died from exhaustion from non-stop X. Oh, so the boned till I croaked in his herb is literal. I'm an MC shredder, but I get the feeling the Ninja Turtle would never die from exhaustion from non-stop X. Edgar Allan Poe married his 13-year-old cousin and would sleep in her coffin with her after she passed away. That's so on brand for him. I've actually heard that he married his cousin because he couldn't legally adopt her for some reason, and he wanted to make sure she was taken care of. Some historians also argued they had more of a brother-sister relationship. There are varying accounts of their marriage, so it may not be gospel truth. But I do know that Poe had rivalries with journalists who liked to print nasty things about him. Cool dude. Creative genius, misunderstood and miserable in his time. It is true that back then women couldn't own property, so the easiest legal way for Poe to make sure his cousin wasn't living on the streets was to marry her. Which is why it's possible that they weren't romantically involved in any way. This stuff used to be more common in other parts of the globe too. During 1942, in a war planning visit to Washington, a British delegation including Winston Churchill stayed at the White House. The president wheeled into Churchill's bedroom one afternoon to discover the prime minister stalking the room in the nude, puffing on a cigar as he dictated to a male secretary. As Roosevelt spun about to leave, Churchill called him back, adding, "The Prime Minister of Britain has nothing to conceal from the President of the United States." Just imagine Dr. spinning those wheels as quickly as possible.